The orbital gate over Concorde's spire glittered like a loop of frozen lightning, and every gun on the ring pretended not to stare at the human corvette easing into view. UTS Tenacity, you are off protocol. Assume holding vector, submit to scan. A dozen voices layered through the traffic net. Negative, replied Meyer Ortiz, ambassador plenipotentiary, steady as a metronome. Diplomatic passage acknowledged in your own summons. We'll take Bay 12. On the external feed, the Tenacity's skin rippled, color, temperature, even micro-texture shifting to the rhythm of the ring's sensor sweep. The Conclave's fire control systems blinked. Their targeting cursors slid, searching for edges that kept changing like a school of fish. Not jammed, no angry noise on the spectrum, just ignored. The way a well-trained mind ignores involuntary flinches. Admiral Klein, riding shotgun in a gray suit that failed to hide Navy, gave a thin smile. Adaptive albedo handshakes holding. If they push to hard lock, we ghost their prediction loop. No need to spook them more than necessary, Maya said, and smoothed the front of her black jacket. She had learned a long time ago that diplomacy begins with deciding which fear to leave unwatered. The Hall of 12 was built to make pilgrims cry. Platforms hung in a kilometer of open air, each habitat carved to flatter someone's mythology. Crystal choirs humming probability, basalt thrones sweating the gravity of dead worlds, a garden where light walked like an animal. Maya let herself be impressed locally. Then she looked past the spectacle to tripods of eyes and coils of mouths, the actual negotiators, and saw worry-wearing ceremony like an overbright coat. Ambassador Ortiz of the Human Union, intoned Elder Reek of the Oral, a being whose voice coaxed overtones out of stone. You will answer to charges of trespass, exploitation, and contempt for Elder Order. Meyer inclined her head. I will answer to facts and offer better ones. Treasure Ixil of the Meridian combined splayed his carapace fingers. 3 of our claimed zones have human miners operating without remittance. Zones, Maya repeated, neutral. Not settlements, not extractive bases, not posted notices. Zones inked on a map before your species cracked cryogenics. She gestured. Doctor. Sahana Rao tapped her slate, releasing a compact holograph. A starfield scribbled with corridors like brushstrokes, old routes in amber, and in cool blue, narrow paths through what the maps called the dead water, high radiation, tricky gravity, poor lines of sight, places the old rules told you not to go. We went, Maya said simply, because we measure claim by use, not by aspiration. High Marshal Sar's crest darkened. Your scouts accidentally surveyed our interior batteries. Coincidence? Curiosity, Admiral Klein said, then was quiet. Maya didn't need him now. Elders, she continued. We read your charters. They assume scarcity and channel it with fees, queues, permissions. Human history suggests scarcity is often manufactured by process, not physics. We propose to test the inverse. Open routes, open settlement, open trade. No gatekeepers where no one lives. Murmurs, ripples of posture. The Thren who wore time like a shawl uncoiled enough to speak. Unstructured expansion births war, we remember. So do we, Maya said. We remember Dunkirk, how civilians turned a coastline into a lifeline while empires argued. We remember Midway, how a handful of carriers and a good read on pattern changed history. Order emerges when free people act with duty. You can't centrally plan courage. Poetry, Ixil hissed. Not policy. Policy, Maya said, and her tone stopped the chamber. We are not petitioning entry. We request recognition of a parallel, the lantern routes. We will develop unclaimed space, offer voluntary pacts, mutual defense, open standards, arbitration by consent. You keep your charter. We keep ours. We meet where interests overlap. Silence stretched until it threatened to snap. Reek's glow dimmed. You misunderstand. The conclave does not admit optionality. Maya's smile barely showed. That's the misunderstanding we came to correct. Elder Reek lifted a hand. On the periphery, weapons bore a degree toward humbler readiness. The ring wasn't aiming exactly. It was rehearsing. Maya met the rehearsal with an open palm toward Dr. Rao. The star map narrowed to a wedge at the edge of the old lanes. Open the ardent gate, Maya said. 1 corridor, 1 hour. Let us show you what you left on the table. The elder's eyes tilted, calculating prestige against curiosity against precedent. Around the hall, advisors murmured in chords and clicks. Reek's hand hung in the air. Do it, Meyer added, soft enough to sound like an invitation, loud enough to sound like a dare. The ardent gate yawned with reluctant magnificence, its event lattice peeling like struck glass. The lane beyond had been marked in meridian charts as borderline, unstable gradients, relativistic sheer, anemic stars, little to trade. The tenacity slid in with the confidence of a courier who has measured the tide. Telemetry clean, Dr. Rao murmured. Radiation spikes within modeled range. Navigation is threading the shears. What are you proving? Treasure Ixil demanded, carapace haloed by projections of balance sheets that felt like threats. That your ships are reckless, that your criteria are out of date, Maya replied. You wrote this lane off when shielding mass penalties made transit unprofitable. Our composite foams laugh at your mass penalties. You declared no one could see in the mist. Our sensors paint with different light. The holograph bloomed with the blue of new routes human scouts had cut through drift and glare, thin, almost improvised, like footpaths beaten by villagers where city planners forgot to put a road. The elder species saw with an ache that was part envy, part self-reproach, that the dead water wasn't dead. It was just indifferent to complacency. High Marshal Sar did not blink. Paths are not policies. Open lanes pull predators. Maya nodded. Then build corridors that do not reward predation. We operate proportionality. We will protect convoys, but we will not glass worlds. If you prefer theory, call it just war. If you prefer practice, call it insurance. SAR's crest rose. Insurance needs underwriters. Who underwrites you? Everyone who finds cooperation cheaper than conquest. Admiral Klein's voice was a dry riverbed. You don't need unanimity, you need momentum. The Thren sighed in a register that made the balcony cables hum. You would replace hierarchy with consent. Not replace, Maya said. Add. Our own ancestors learned from the civil rights movement that decentralized networks, church basements, student committees, small businesses could route around centralized reluctance. Systems can be lawful without being lorded. Emergent order is not chaos. It's what you get when many hands push in roughly the same moral direction. Ixil's appendages fluttered. You talk like you already run something. We run what we built, Maya said. Stations held together by volunteers and vacuum tape. Clinics where gene techs work beside clergy because both can hold a shaking hand. A data mesh that routes around monopolies because emergencies don't care about tariffs. If you are baiting us to threaten force, Sar said, we can oblige. Maya held his gaze. Then run your numbers. Victory is not defeating an opponent. Sometimes it's raising the price until even angry treasurers go cold. Admiral Klein flicked a finger. Tenacity's hull rippled again, this time not to hide but to teach. Targeting cursors everywhere tried to settle and fell through the ship like rain through a lattice that only existed when someone looked away. The display threw up polite captions, prediction decoupled. Solution cost prohibitive. You've had FTL for half a century, Ixil whispered. This is not linear progress. It isn't, Dr. Rao agreed. We came late to the party, brought fresh eyes, and copied no one's bad habits. Maya spread her hands as if offering a tray. We're not asking you to like our independence. We're gifting you a new frontier to dislike us in, and data. You can test the hypothesis without committing belief. The chamber's murmurs shifted tone, for the first time not outrage, not even begrudging respect, but academic curiosity wrestling with wounded pride. Then a comms officer on the ring, too junior to remember theater, blurted on open channel. Distress beacon, multiple civilian signatures, pirate marks inside the ardent corridor. High Marshal Sar's crest snapped. Close the gate. Close it and you administer their deaths, Maya said. Open and you own them. Reek's hand hovered again, but this time it trembled with history. The choir of crystal voices threaded through probabilities and found no indifferent path. Ixil hissed something that sounded like budget and sounded exactly like fear. Maya did not look back at Klein because she didn't need to. We have a convoy interdiction playbook. Non-lethal first, kinetic last, proportional throughout. Your rules of engagement or ours? Reek's glow fell into a deep, severe hue. You will act under conclave oversight. You will not fire first. Copy, Maya said, already moving. We'll save your people by your rules. She stepped toward the rail, and the hall's gravity seemed to tip with her. Tenacity, plot intercept. Interlock with their net, Navajo Protocol 6 for voice privacy. Let's keep the opera for later. The ardent corridor throbbed like a throat. Somewhere in that blue-white noise, civilian hulls begged for time. Go, Maya said, and the tenacity leapt. The Deadwater wasn't dead so much as moody. It threw tantrums of radiation and sulked in gravitational eddies, and between those moods a convoy of freighters and family ships scattered like gulls from a stone. The pirate craft rode the turbulence with the vicious grace of sharks. Their lances pulsed in the narrow spectrum old sensors missed. ID on the pirates? Klein asked, already knowing. Sahana didn't answer. She was too busy braiding a comms mesh that could hold while space yanked at it like a cat. Scavlords, Maya said, watching the telltale jitter of ships built from other ships' bones. Not desperate, professional, that helps. Helps. Reek's voice cracked over the line, squeezed through old codecs. You are about to fight. We're about to make fighting unattractive, Maya corrected. The tenacity blossomed drones, little gray beetles with ugly magnets and beautiful manners. Barnacles, Sahana said. Single use, they chew capacitors, not crew. Klein set the tone. Rules are conclaves. We posture, we warn, we disable. If they shoot civilians, we escalate. His voice was a city ordinance written in granite and then explained by a compassionate neighbor. Maya toggled the convoy channel. This is the human ship tenacity acting under Concord oversight. Keep your engines warm and your lights screaming. We're going to thread you a path. Don't be heroes, be neighbors. The private channel clicked twice in acknowledgement, the agreed-upon way to tell everyone that someone out there heard and could unlikely answer. She felt the click in her bones. The first pass was waltz, not wrestling. Drones stitched a net across a pirate's bow, not to stop him, but to make continuing the chase feel like dragging a mattress through a swamp. Another drone clamped to a coil gun and became a very persuasive fuse. Pirate lances strobed. One scored Tenacity's skin, painting it with heat that went nowhere useful. Sahana smiled without amusement. We reflect waste. Somewhere a civilian transport took a glancing hit and spun like an old coin. Grab her, Maya said. Klein's jaw tightened. Tractor physics hated the Deadwater's moods, but the Tenacity loved tasks that advertised their difficulty. The transport settled into their wake, alive and rattled. Translate tactical to Old Meridian for the ring, Maya said, and to Hopi for our close coordination. The Hopi? Reek asked. Navajo code talkers taught us during the Pacific War that language can be armor, Meyer answered. We honor that by not letting the trick die, and because the pirates aren't studying our anthropology. A pirate corvette spooled something less polite, a boarding spike that would carry teeth and men. No, Klein said, a prayer and a ruling. Barnacles flowered along the spike's spine and chewed it into embarrassment. The pirate fired thrusters hard, panic, not plan, and drifted broadside into the conclave's remote camera, where all the elders stared at their failure to anticipate the new shape of an old crime. Tenacity, Reek said. This restraint, why? Because proportionality keeps tomorrow from hating today, Maya said. Because we do not want or need enemies who buried brothers, because we needed to prove a thesis this afternoon. One of the Scavlords made the ugly choice. He dove through the convoy, angling to slap the side of a nursery barge with a beam set to the color of murder. Klein's hand hovered. Rules of engagement? Reek's answer shaved a second off history. Protect the barge. The Tenacity forgot being polite for a count of 3. The corvette turned broadside and spat a ribbon of dense light that welded the Predator's drives into a sculpture. The pirate ship rolled, harmless as a log. Drones swarmed its vents and made them think winter had come. Convoy, Maya said, voice steady over the ringing in her blood. Follow the crumbs, we laid them for you. Ships moved, even fear can form an orderly queue when shown a lit hallway. On the ring, watchers exhaled a noise the architects of the hall had intended for hymns. 2 more contacts, Sahana said. Heavier, late to the party. Klein's mouth went thin. They saw us pull our punches and think we're soft. Make softness expensive, Maya said, and then make leaving free. They did. The tenacity danced the deadwater, and the pirates learned that a ship that would not kill you could still make you write long, sobbing letters to your quartermaster. Capacitors died sensible deaths. Turrets forgot how to spin. Engines entered therapy. Last civilian through, Sahana said. We're done here. We're not, Klein countered, eyes on a tremor in the lane. The corridor's mood is changing. It was. The lattice in the ardent gate groaned on all channels, the music of strain. Reek's voice returned tight. Close the gate before the fold collapses. Not yet, Maya said. We still have wolves in the hall, and they will eat the janitors if we shut the doors. Ambassador, Reek warned. Trust once, Maya said. The corridor shivered like a living throat. For a heartbeat, even the pirates looked like honest sailors watching weather. Tenacity, Klein said, very calm. Now, the ship threw the last thread of drones, painted a line in a color only computers love, and the pirates took it because even thieves recognize a path home. The gate, Reek began. Close it, Maya said, and the lattice sang with relief. The Hall of 12 stared at the quiet. Relief came like rain after a brush fire. Then a new tone cut the room, a siren older than etiquette. And Maya turned because alarms mean someone somewhere was about to pretend accident while meaning sabotage. The blast was small by the standards of people who think explosions are arguments. It was big by the standards of chambers designed for polite thunder. A section of the lower balcony belched smoke. 2 delegates lay stunned, one bleeding a color that matched nothing in the visible spectrum. Security squads unfolded from the walls like bad ideas finally confessed. Local containment, Klein snapped. No shots unless you see teeth. Ambassador, Reek said, voice pinned to composure by old habit. This is conclave space. We will. Coordinate. Maya finished. Your house, your rules, our medics. Sahana was already moving with a satchel of devices that looked like toys and performed like hope. The human team split tourniquets, aerosols, transdermal stitches, polite as guests but practiced as fire crews. One of the injured, a crystalline tenor from the choir's delegations, sang a low terror that fogged the air. Hush, Sahana said, and used a patch that turned the song into oxygen. Who? Reek asked the air, which had no answer. Security feeds stuttered. The blast's teeth had been old school, shaped charges, a timing coin, no network signature. Worrying because it implied someone who distrusted modernity on principle or someone who knew the ring's modernity too well. Maya looked up, past smoke and panicking etiquette, and saw the social physics accelerate. This was the pivot point in every history class worth its tuition. The moment when a frightened polity chooses either to blame the nearest stranger or to bind the nearest wound. She thought of the way small boats had crossed to Dunkirk without permission slips. She thought of how church basements had fed marchers when permits were denied. She thought of how a handful of linguists with radios had saved lives by speaking words no enemy bothered to learn. Ambassador, Reek said, lower now, you saved our convoy, but if your independence breeds this. It doesn't, Maya said, gently ruthless. But it might be blamed for it, which is different and how civil wars hire. Klein's sleeve chimed, quiet, intimate. He looked. The message was from a lantern station deep in the deadwater, and its brevity terrified him. Silence tied arrival. Beacons dimming, corridors failing, evac alone impossible. He handed the slate to Maya, who read it twice because denial is an underrated instinct. The silence tide was an old myth among pilots, regions where space went deaf, where signals drowned, where beacons sang to themselves until their music turned to rust. Myths, until someone you loved typed in all caps. Reek watched the light leave and re-enter Maya's eyes. What is it? An older predator than pirates, Maya said, And it doesn't negotiate, it eats the instruments that let us meet. The hall had steadied into competence, smoke drawn, injuries triaged, security fanning outward. The elders looked like people who had expected to punish a child and found a house fire. "What do you require?" Reek asked, the question harder than any accusation he had made. "A working group," Maya said. "Your choir's probability weavers, our mesh engineers, SARS patrol graphers, Ixil's logistics. We throw everything at the tide, and we do it publicly before rumor grades us." SAR's crest flared despite himself. "You would co-command this with us." "I would co-own the outcome," Maya said. "If we fail, the lantern routes go dark. If you fail, the old lanes dim out of caution. If we succeed, we prove that choice beats obedience at saving lives." Ixil made a sound like coins forced to mate. "Cost? Everything today, less tomorrow. Also pride." Reek's glow shifted to a grave color that the guides called acceptance and children called the color of winters that did not kill. He lifted his hand, and this time it did not hesitate. "Conclave recognizes an ad hoc coalition," he said, and the hall's recording stones took down the sentence as if it were law. "Human union to co-chair, tasking to follow." Somewhere, the ring's sirens went quiet as if embarrassed by how loud they had been. Maya felt the adrenaline ebb, leaving the cold clarity of next steps. "We will need corridors you do not trust," she said, "and we will need to show the galaxy what we are doing as we do it. Secrecy kills twice." "Ambassador," Reek said, almost wry, "your proposal resembles a miracle performed with spreadsheets." "History suggests most miracles do," Maya said. "Ask any quartermaster at Dunkirk." Sahana returned, hands shining with someone else's blood. "Stabilized, and Ambassador, one of the bomb's components is stamped from Meridian stock. Ancient but yours," she added to Ixil. Someone raided an old closet to frame a present, which meant politics had just found its accelerant. Maya turned the slate toward the delegations so that the word silence tide arrival could stare everyone down. "We can fight each other over whose stamp is on the shrapnel," she said, voice clear enough to be quoted. "Or we can keep the lights on." The chamber did not answer in words exactly, but power, old and new, tilted toward the door that led to the work. Outside, the ardent gate flickered, a candle bullied by a draft. And beyond it, where the dead water sulked and hummed, something large enough to make allegory look small rolled in. They named the working group in the plain way people name lifeboats. The lantern task. Titles came later, tasks came now. The Hall of 12 emptied into war rooms and spillover chapels. Choir tacticians spilled probability threads like silk onto human mesh maps. SARS patrol graphers stacked patrol arcs into something like a quilt. Ixil's quartermasters rolled their eyes and rolled out warehouses. Maya took a corner of the table and drew 3 boxes: people, power, paths. "The silence tide starves one of these first, then eats the others. We feed them faster than it can bite." "Doctor," Sahana Rao built the first prototype on the table out of borrowed hardware and gentle profanity, a jury-rigged singing lattice, a photon-gravitic resonator tuned to scream the corridor's shape back at itself, loud enough to keep a path from remembering it should collapse. "Ugly," she admitted. But so was the Apollo 13 CO2 scrubber, not auditioning for a museum. SAR scowled because scowling was how he said yes. "How many?" "As many as there are hands," Maya said. "We do this like the Berlin airlift, bred by the minute. Little ships, big ships, whatever flew yesterday. We make corridors behave by refusing to let them forget we are here." Ixil's mandibles clicked, adding columns. Fuel, foam, food. He paused, grudged a 4th F. Funerals. "Keep the ledger clean," Maya said. "Names deserve more than a number." They lit the first lattice at the ardent gate's throat, anchoring it to the ring with cables that looked like prayers and worked like equations. The tide pressed forward, an absence with weight. The lattice answered by humming the corridor bright, a note no sensor alone could hold, but which, layered across the task force, became a memory no patch of space could quite shake. "Lantern Station 9 reporting," a breathless voice cut in. "Beacons dimming. Families loaded. We can hold 6 hours if the tide is kind. It is not kind." "Tenacity copies," Admiral Klein said, Pushing to you with 4 lighters and a tow. Sar will take flank 3 if your patrols can kedge us against sheer. You will accept an escort, Sar said, insults bristling. 2 of my cruisers and a choir skiff. If you fail, I prefer witnesses. Consent noted, Maya said and meant it. Pride had too few calories for the day ahead. The galaxy watched because secrecy kills twice. Meyer ordered the feeds opened. The live map of convoys and lighters and charitable hulls that had no business being this brave. In a dozen cultures, a new verb budded. To lantern, verb, to move where a system declares impossible by teaching it a song it cannot forget. Volunteers arrived in the stupid, holy way volunteers always do. A shuttle whose captain still wore a caterer's apron. A medical barge whose owner had once served drinks to admirals and knew how to ration dignity. A farmer in a pressure suit the color of harvest. We don't do oaths, Maya told the camera. We do assignments. Bring what you have. Elderic stood at the edge of the ops pit like a cliff, learning how to be a bridge. You will not weaponize this, he warned softly. If your philosophy is a sword, keep it sheathed until we file an edge together. Mutual constraint. Maya said, virtue ethics aren't a book club, they're a pact. We choose proportionality because we like who it makes us tomorrow, not because it's easy today. On the second hour, the meridian combines internal comms flickered with a message not meant for anyone's outside eyes. Sahana read it upside down on Ixil's slate because engineers learn to read from angles. Old stock depot breached. Legacy tags missing. Antitrust faction. Her mouth flattened. Your radicals used museum bombs to frame present enemies. Ixil looked sick in a species-specific way. We are a trade combine, we do not. You're also people, Maya said, not unkind. People collect zealots like ships collect barnacles, scrape them later. Right now, they'll try to turn the tide into a market opportunity. They launched. Tenacity, 2 conclave cruisers, 1 choir skiff that made the lanes sing like glass. The lattice nodes glowed a sober violet as they were dropped, each one a little promise that tomorrow might still have routes. This is either working, Klein said, guiding their lead through a shearing crosswind of gravity, or we are all narrating our hubris. Both can be true, Maya replied. History says so. Ask the airlift pilots who landed in fog by counting fence posts. Halfway to Lantern 9, the channel broke into shards of vowels. The tide's front had teeth. Tenacity's hull blurred its albedo into a smile that instruments couldn't quite see. The conclave cruisers threw out tethers to the choir skiff, and the skiff sang through the cables, turning steel into choir. They hit the station's neighborhood like firefighters carrying buckets into a cathedral. Battered hulls clung to its ribs. A child waved through a viewport with the terrifying seriousness of children doing adult math. Sahana's voice went clinical. We'll have to prioritize lightest load first. It's triage. Maya tasted the copper of the choice. Utilitarian math would save the most. Virtue ethics demanded you see individuals, not throughput. Stoicism cautioned that control was limited, but obligation wasn't. We take the smallest now so the largest can live later, she said, hating that the sentence fit so well. Pirate marks, Klein warned. They came to feed on wreckage. Of course they did, Maya said. Predation is just hunger with a press office. SARS cruisers turned broadside, cannons down, hails up. By conclave writ, he intoned, this corridor is under humanitarian convoy. Fire and you forfeit parley. A pirate lance tickled Tenacity's paint and found prayerful mathematics instead of purchase. Sahana exhaled. Our barnacles brought more friends. They moved bodies, they moved hope. They held the corridor's memory like a choir holds pitch. Then the tide pressed again harder, and the lattice dimmed to the color of a bruise. Ambassador, Reek's voice came thin across a suddenly long distance. Your feed is thinning. In the ops pit, a Meridian officer, face too calm, slid a thumb along a console he should not have known. A circuit tripped, and a lattice node laughed itself to sleep. Sahana turned, already running. We've got a saboteur in our house. And in Maya's ear, Lantern Station 9 whispered the sentence every rescuer dreads. We cannot hold. Sahana hit the Meridian officer like water finds a crack, quiet, inevitable everywhere at once. "Hands off the console," she said, and when he tried bravado, she took his thumb with a pressure cuff that made lying hurt. The feed stuttered. In the corner of the ops pit, a second figure twitched, then bolted. Conclave's security flowed in a disciplined wave. Admiral Klein's remote bark snapped over the line. Non-lethal if at all possible, but fast. "Who are you?" Ixil demanded, voice like a receipt set on fire. The first saboteur gasped a phrase that did not translate cleanly in most tongues. "Market correction." The second hissed something about teachable scarcity before a stun net taught him boredom. Ixil sagged under the weight of discovering that his house had contained zealots whose math had no column for the dead. Later, Maya said, the iron ring of triage in her tone. "Record confessions for the courts. Right now Sahana has to keep the lantern singing." The tide pressed again, a cold animal cheek against a window. It ate high band with indifference and low band with appetite. Choir skiffs retuned their songs to basement keys. Signal protocol falls back to drums. Sahana said, "We go rhythmic, redundant, stupid on purpose. Navajo patterning Hopi tempo, packet in triple, broadcast wide." "Drums," Reek repeated like a man from marble feeling the itch to dance. "It's how humans talked across hills before radio," Maya said. "We're allowed to keep inventions that worked." The tenacity, inbound, switched her comms to sound-alikes and pulse beats. The choir translated tones to crystal vibrations that didn't care if light was plumbing or poetry. SARS cruisers thumped cadence with microjets. For a moment, the corridor became music with ships attached. They reached Lantern 9 with their teeth set. The station's skin was open-wounded, its radiators hung like tired flags. Inside, volunteers ran the relay of small mercies, oxygen canisters, blankets, names. "Load by color," Klein ordered. Ubans to tenacity, green to cruiser 1, yellow to skiff. "Red bands, you stay with me." He didn't explain red bands to the camera because dignity scales poorly when televised. A pirate corvette nosed close, hungry for easy meat. SAR's flagship slid between predator and prey with the contemptuous grace of a teacher taking a rock from a bully's hand. "Not today," he said. The corvette hesitated, remembered it like being alive, and left. Then the tide hiccuped, and the lantern lattice failed in a peal, node by node, like a string of lights losing a bet. The corridor went dark in the way that isn't about photons, it was about confidence. Tenacity's instruments threw up polite eulogies. Sahana swore, translated the swears into math, and jammed a bypass that should not have worked. "Power budget at 27%, Klein said. "We're running on favors and superstitions." "Add one more superstition," Maya said. "We vent heat in pulses, prime numbers. Make the corridor hear us even if it can't listen." Prime numbers strutted out of radiators into a night that measured souls in watts. The choir caught the rhythm and amplified it through crystal bones. Children who would later pretend not to remember would hum those primes in their sleep and grow up feeling safe near certain counts. Saboteurs on the ring had not acted alone. A third zealot cracked a maintenance panel above the choir's pit and dropped a rod that might not kill anyone but would tear the pitch apart. Reek, whose people were not built for sprinting, sprinted anyway. His hand closed, barely. The rod clanged into his palm instead of onto the floor. He sang once, involuntary, a hurt note, and held on. "We do not break the song," he told no one and everyone. "Conclave," Maya called, "broadcast the sabotage live. Sunlight now beats tribunals later." Ixil flinched like a bank account learning forgiveness. He lifted his mandibles and told the galaxy about his house's filth. At Lantern 9, the last families crossed the docking umbilical with the reluctant dignity of people who have left a kitchen tidy for strangers. The station's chief, a woman with grease to her elbows and stars tattooed where rings wear, pressed a data brick into Sahana's palm. "Our calibrations. Don't make other stations guess." "Payment on delivery," Sahana said and tucked it near her heart. "Tenacity," Klein said quietly. "We can either light one more lattice here or keep enough juice to tow 2 hulks." Light the lattice, Meyer answered, tasting a decision that would come back as ghost. It will not be the crew that saved a single ship and lost the road for 100. He nodded like a man who had been waiting for permission to choose the harder right. Engineering prepped the dump. They bled Tenacity's reserves into the crude frame Sahana had bolted to the station's spine. The node coughed, then sang, then kept singing on the momentum of its own relief. Now we're broke, Klein said, and the corridor's mood is hostile. Then we ride mood, Maya replied. We've dated worse. They turned for home with the tide at their heels. The camera on the ring captured the moment the corridor's hum wavered, once, twice, and fell flat. Every light on the Tenacity dimmed to a funeral whisper. And somewhere deep in the instrument stack, a piece of code written by a tired graduate student began to count in primes without being asked. Dark is an absolute only to the eye. The Tenacity's dark was populated by the cool tick of relays, by the breath of sleeping children, by the algorithm that refused to be sad. Primes marched 2, 3, 5, 7, 11 like a scout troop on a night hike. The choir skiff answered with harmonics that sounded like rain on crystal. SAR's cruiser burped thrusters in a pattern lift jets could respect. In the ring's ops pit, Sahana banged a spanner on the console, not to fix it but to keep time. Dead reckoning, Klein said, hands loose on controls like a pianist waiting for the next chord. We navigate on rhythm and luck. Luck is just unadvertised preparation, Maya said. And contingency planning is a moral virtue. Marcus Aurelius would approve. Who? A stoic who learned to rule by ruling himself. We quote him when scared. The tide pressed an opinion onto the hull. The ship shivered and remembered it had bones. Heat budgets went strange. A child asked, too calmly, if silence could catch fire. Maya told her the truth. Only if you let it. The pirate who had hesitated earlier returned with friends and a new doctrine. The lantern corridor made ordinary ambushes expensive. The broken one made them cheap. SAR moved to intercept and found his guns unprofitable. He chose distance and insult instead. There are children aboard us. He transmitted, disgust familiar and controlled. Every ballistic you fire here makes your gods smaller, even if you don't have any. That sort of moral arithmetic doesn't stop thieves. It does sometimes make their shots sloppy. Enough. Barnacles, Sahana whispered, because some prayers are nouns. She pulsed the last of Tenacity's drones toward the pirates like dandelion seeds on a mean wind. The little machines kissed capacitors with hungry mouths and left quiet behind. The pirates peeled away, not from fear but boredom. Boredom saves lives more reliably than heroics. Historians never write. The corridor's memory stuttered. The lattice behind them dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again like a tired singer warming up. Reek leaned near the choir, cheeks pale. We can hold one more swell, he told himself, and the future. Ring, Maya called. Put me on every public channel you own. You are live, Ixil said, his voice tired and bigger. This is Ambassador Meyer Ortiz of the Human Union, she said. We are not asking for votes. We are assigning jobs. If you have a hull that can carry bodies, go to these coordinates. She pushed out pings in 3 legal frameworks and 5 languages. If you have food, bring it. If you have hands, bring them. If you have nothing, bring your listening. It sounded like begging because humility and command share a root. Ships answered. Little ones first. Taxis, luggers, a research capsule that had to be convinced to stop measuring the tide and start moving grandmothers. Then big ships, a Meridian bulk hauler whose captain preferred shame to funerals, a whisper-touched veil ship that could not touch metal but could cradle people in shadows, an old Dominion patrol craft whose crew didn't ask SAR for permission and got a reprimand scheduled for the after-action. Civil defense by consent, SAR muttered. Doctrine will have opinions. Doctrine can file paperwork, Maya said. People are filing themselves. They reached the next lattice node running on civic duty and the residual heat of decent choices. Tenacity's reactor coughed. Klein looked at the panel the way some men look at old dogs who have chased the last stick they are going to chase. We can either light this node or keep our core warm enough to limp. Maya stared at the kids strapped in crash couches with their headphones tuned to prime numbers and for one heartbeat wished to be small. Then she remembered Dunkirk again, boats that chose to be bridges. Light the node, we limp on toes and friends. Klein nodded, and the reactor gave its last proud sigh into the lattice. The node woke like a lighthouse taught its job by strangers. The corridor remembered itself a little. The tenacity went quiet in the noble sense. Systems that normally whispered began to pray. Sar slid a tow line out, grumbling like a man who knows exactly how much he is about to care. The choir skiff leaned into them with song. Behind, the pirate pack tested boredom's patience and nearly emptied it. Then, distracted by new, easier prey, the rumor of a stranded freighter, they veered away. Sometimes the universe gifts you a morally ambiguous reprieve. You take it and argue later. The ops pit rolled updates like a rosary. Lantern 10 held. Lantern 3 failed, but failed loud, and its people rode the noise to our open hands. The sabotage network, 4 people now, 3 collared, 1 missing, tried to push a fake evacuation alarm into a hospital ship's channel. Sahana kicked it in the teeth with a patch labeled Civil Rights Playbook that contained nothing but instructions for organizing a kitchen. They broke into the clear not because the tide relented, but because the line behind them turned from singular effort to shared habit. A habit of help makes a road. The ring grew large in the viewport. Home, tribunal, negotiation table, hospital all at once. We are coming in without pride, and Maya told traffic control. Send us your worst critics and your best nurses. Lights winked along the ring like neighbors on a porch. Then a shadow slid across those lights. The missing saboteur had found a new thesis. One last charge tucked close to a support strut designed to make the gate hate its own weight. Contact, Sahana breathed. Can you defuse? Klein asked, knowing he shouldn't. Yes, she lied because hope is a tool. She grabbed a bag and ran. Sahana's world narrowed to tools and the precise angle of her hands. The charge was antique, blessedly, wired by someone who trusted old tricks more than new checks. You can't be this arrogant and this careful, she murmured to the absent zealot, and began untying cruelty like a knot left by a tired sailor. Around her the ring flexed. Security cordons arrived and did the smartest thing they would do all day. They stood between medics and cameras. Elder Reek leaned against a rail not meant for leaning and read a prayer that had a clause about admitting you couldn't do everything. Ixil authorized the destruction of a warehouse full of collectible munitions on a live feed, surrendering margin to protect trust. In the corridor, the tenacity drifted on the end of SAR's tow line like an uncomplaining cart. Children slept. Klein watched hatch indicators and the reactor temperature that had gone to 0 and stubbornly refused to go negative. Stay, he told the ship as if ships were dogs. Maya stood in the chamber under the crystal dome, hair messy, jacket smudged, and asked for something bigger than permission. Elder Reek, High Marshal Sar, Treasurer Ixil, Choir whisper-touched Meridian Dominion Thren, we saved who we could today because we acted like a neighborhood. Let's make that formal. While your engineer disarms a bomb under our feet, Sar said, because it is the martial habit to test proposals under duress. Especially then, Maya replied, because it proves the point. Centralized perfection fails in the time it takes to be perfect. Decentralized duty succeeds in the time it takes to be brave. Reek's eyes tracked some distance only elders can see. What do you propose? A charter that does not require obeisance to enable obligation, Maya said. Lantern accords. Conclave continues to govern those who want the old lanes and their fees. Humans and any willing partners steward the lantern routes, open settlement where no one lives, open standards for rescue, voluntary arbitration when we bump elbows, mutual defense limited by proportionality, transparency presumed, exit always allowed. Consent is not theater, it is the hinge. Ixil made a sound like a coin being struck true, and when ideology meets invoice, then we pay, Maya said, in money when we can, in blood when we must. Today we did both, but we published the ledger. Sahana's voice crackled over the hall's speakers, very calm for someone lying under fate. "On my mark," she said, "I will be either the smartest person in this room or a cautionary tale. If it's the second, name a street after me." "Marked," Klein said softly. She pulled the fuse. Nothing happened, which is the most satisfying form of physics. Then the ring breathed in relief on 1,000 vents. Sahana exhaled, made herself small, suddenly very easy, and wiped her brow with the back of a hand that trembled now that it had permission. The cheering began in the wrong place, somewhere in a service tunnel, and spread like a human thing through non-human throats. Reek looked at Maya, at the engineers, at the cameras making a civic feast of their faces, and nodded once. "Conclave recognizes the lantern accords," he said, and if the sentence trembled, it was because truth sometimes shivers on its way out. "Member species may participate without surrendering other loyalties. This is not secession. This is addition." SAR's crest settled into a posture that doctrine would someday call guarded endorsement. "I will publish a supplement to rules of engagement. Humanitarian corridors take precedence. Proportionality becomes trademark rather than exception. We will build boredom into our weapons." Ixil's mandibles clicked, counted, conceded. "We will trade with lantern stations on terms that do not extract the future. Our radicals will learn prisons. Our warehouses will learn inspections." The months that followed were calendars fat with logistics. The lantern task stayed open even as the tide learned to sulk elsewhere. New nodes went up with ugly beauty. Choir skiffs taught miners to sing. Whisper-touched guides mapped shadows that liked to be courted. Human families bought stalls in markets that used to sell permission slips, and now sold rope and maps. Economists tried to call the effect a lantern externality, and were bullied by grandmothers into calling it help. Pirates learned boredom in new dialects. Some retired into taxi work and did not tell their grandchildren other stories. The Meridian Combine prosecuted its saboteurs with public defenders and public patients. Trials streamed on the same channels that once streamed Panic. Viewership was high and reassuringly bored. The tenacity lived, but with a limp. Klein petitioned to keep the scorch marks unpainted. Sahana installed a plaque that read prime numbers saved you in 6 languages and a drawing. Children touched it on tours. Maya once caught SAR doing the same and pretended not to. When the diplomats found time to write instead of run, the lantern accords fit on 12 pages and a fold-out map. They were signed not in the Hall of 12, but in a maintenance bay that still smelled like sweat because the hall had hosted enough important things. People clapped, then went back to work, which is the highest honor paperwork can receive. Reek asked, quiet over tea brewed in a pot older than 2 empires, "What will you do when your routes lead off the map?" "Invite you," Maya said, "and pack extra lanterns." He looked at her the way elders look at storms they have decided to love. "We summoned you to be instructed," he said, "and you taught us the math of consent." "Math is just stories that survive rigor," Maya said. "We learned ours from people who built movements with casseroles and mimeographs. We added ships." When the first expedition formed to cross the dark between galaxies, its registry made someone in a cubicle somewhere cry. Human Union corvettes with patched-over scorch, choir skiffs that had learned jokes, Meridian freighters whose captains had discovered that margin also measured meaning, whisper-touched veils that could carry secrets and tenderly not tell them. SAR contributed a lean cruiser for the boredom, he claimed. Ixil sent accountants who had learned how to bless. They departed under a sky crowded with lantern nodes blinking the long hello of a civilization that had chosen not one ruler but many custodians. The Hall of 12 dimmed its ceremonial lights and lit practical ones for the next shift. Children slept without primes in their mouths for the first time in weeks. Maya stood on the observation deck, hair tamed, jacket pressed, and allowed herself 10 seconds of unprofessional joy. The galaxy did not get simpler. It got kinder in measurable ways, fewer maydays, fuller ledgers, more streets named after engineers. "Ambassador," Klein said, stepping up beside her, limping only when the day was long, "what do you call this in the textbooks?" She watched the fleet take the first slow step into a dark that wasn't absolute anymore. Humanity, she said, lighting the lantern routes. And far ahead, where the dark liked to pretend it was the only story, something answered with the barest, bravest pulse of returning light.